I remember driving in my car many years ago and blaring on the radio, Tina Turner is talking about what's love got to do with it, got to do with it. I just thought it was the catchiest song in the whole world, and I sang that song for probably 2 or 3 years and just thought, man, this is an amazing song. And then I listened to the words. In fact, I jotted them down. It's a secondhand emotion, a sweet old-fashioned notion. Who needs a heart when a heart can be broken? And what Tina's really saying is real love is too dangerous. She just says, you know, just when you're with people, get what you can, be satisfied, but genuine, real love. She says, what's love got to do with it? And you know, as we do this series together, I ask myself, what's love got to do with spiritual simplicity? In fact, you might be saying, you know, he's talking a lot about love, but I thought this was spiritual simplicity. Well, let me tell you, it has everything to do with spiritual simplicity, because real transformation, it doesn't happen by trying hard and new techniques and time management. There's a place for all that. But you know what? Transformation occurs when you realize what love has to do with slowing your pace, making time for people. You see, when you start saying yes to relationships, when you say yes to love, you do less because there's a bigger yes, you love more. And so to really understand spiritual simplicity, you need to be able to unpack 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Now, if you will, open your Bibles there, 1 Corinthians 13. And as you do, I want you to kind of remove the picture of the Christian bookstore and the beautiful little poem, or remove the idea of the beautiful bride that you saw as someone read 1 Corinthians 13. Let me give you the skinny on this passage, okay? The city that it was written to was a portal city. It's a happening place. It's urban. It's fast. It's dynamic. It's worldly. I mean, there are prostitutes on every corner. There are idols on every corner. And God has birthed a New Testament church. And these are young Christians going through some very difficult times. In fact, it's probably the most dysfunctional church written to in the entire New Testament. The Apostle Paul will address a number of issues. They've written letters. What about this? What about this? What about that? And he'll say, now concerning this, concerning this, concerning that, until he gets up to chapter 13. And chapter 13 is in a context. It's wedged. It's like the peanut butter and jelly in the sandwich between chapter 12 and chapter 14. And chapter 12 opens up with an issue that was producing a lot of conflict. It's talked about who's mature. How do you measure real spirituality? And chapter 12 and chapter 14 are raising this issue. And the Corinthians had a lot of different answers to that. Some, you're spiritually mature. You're authentic if you speak in tongues. And others, no, if you prophesy. Or others, if you do radical acts of faith. And they had all these different things. So what I want you to hear is, this passage is not just a beautiful poem about love. This passage is really a corrective. It's to a group of people that live a lot like us. A lot of good things got in the way. I mean, they're doing ministry. They're seeing manifestations of the Holy Spirit like crazy. And yet, when they come together around the Lord's Supper, there's no love, chapter 11. When they come together and they have arguments, they're suing one another, chapter 6. When they come together, they have divisions, and so-and-so honors this person and so-and-so honors that person. This is a church where love is missing. So here's what I want you to get. Simplifying your life is going to be about you and me understanding how do you love more. Because when you really love more, you end up not just doing less, but you focus your time and your energy on the things that really matter. Open your Bible, follow along, and what I want you to do as I read this passage, I want you to listen for where they perform. I want you to listen carefully for what they possess. And then I want you to listen lastly for kind of what they can provide for other people. Follow along, because a little bit later we're going to look at how we get tied into our performance. We get tied in and we lose love because of what we possess and what we're trying to gain. Or we kind of get thinking, well, I'm providing all these things, and that may or may not mean love. Follow along as I read. If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have or possess the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge and have faith that can move mountains, but don't have love, I am nothing. If I give or if I provide for the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but do not have love, I gain nothing. In fact, here's what the apostle's saying. You want it, verses 1 through 3, here's what he's saying. Anything minus love equals nothing. Think of that. No matter what you possess, no matter how well you can speak or perform, no matter what you provide. I mean, he says you could give all your money to the poor for the wrong motivation. You could be a martyr. And he says it profits you nothing. Let me put it in our world. You could get up early. You could earn a good living. You could minister at church. You could memorize verses from the Bible. You could try to be the best dad, the best mom, the best roommate, the most godly single parent in the whole world. You could provide your kids with every opportunity. You could do all that. But if there's not love, you miss it all. Our busyness, our challenge, our pace, what we're missing in life is because we don't understand the power of love and how to do it. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Performing in your world with the greatest gifts and greatest abilities without love produces nothing. So just let me ask you all. So what are you doing? Your activities, your performance, if you will. I know for me, my drivenness, my workaholism grew out of performing. I was that kid that grew up and, you know, you got 4 A's and a B, you had to talk about why did you get the B? How do you perform? And I brought that performance orientation right into my marriage, right into my parenting, right into being a pastor. And I've had some real times where I had to really stop and say, am I really doing this for God? Or am I doing and performing and trying to earn my favor with people and with God? And just ask yourself, what do your kids really need from you? What's your mate really need from you? What do our friends need from us? Is it really all the stuff that we can do? Or is it who we are, who we bring to the table, the relationships that we share? You notice in the second, it says, possessing the best, the finest, the most amazing things without love. It says, you become nothing. And, you know, isn't it interesting that those of us that love God, we live in a culture that is so materialistic. I mean, I live in one of the most materialistic places in the Bay Area in all the world. And I spend a lot of time around the world in places like Hong Kong and, very materialistic cities. But, you know, the one thing about materialism is materialism isn't about how much you have. In fact, some of the most materialistic people in the whole world are very poor. It's the belief system that if I had that, then I would be satisfied. If I had that, I'd be secure. If I had that, then we'd be happy. And I just wonder how many of us are working a lot of hours and doing a lot of stuff to provide a lot of things for our family, for our kids, to move up to the next house, you know, to have the second place that we can go to upgrade the cars, to get a better job, to possess. And what I can tell you is we have a whole generation of kids that wish mom and dad were home. We did some research earlier, and we had a whole group of kids in their 20s look back on what it was like as they were teenagers. And we asked them like 10, 12 questions. What do you wish your parents would have done? Now, these are people now that are Christians, and they're walking with God. They've come from all kinds of different homes. And here's their feedback to us. I wish my parents would have taken time for me. I wish we would have eaten together. I wish they would have turned off all the technology. I wish we could have talked openly and from the heart. I mean, you know that's what's important. I know that's what's important. But often, this massive drive to possess means we don't do it. The final thing you'll notice in your notes is sacrificially providing for those we love, even meeting great needs on earth without love, it profits you nothing. Well, I think we've had enough time to probably say, you know something, I guess what's love got to do with it? Everything. Because it's not until you say, I commit, I'm going to ask God's grace, I'm going to learn to love more, that you'll ever begin to do less and get your schedule and get your pace and get your priorities where they need to be. So let me give you a little prescription. Here's 3 things I've found about applying this passage that has really helped me to do less and to love more. First, the secret to simplifying your life is focus. I mean, that's not earth-shattering, right? But it's focus. It's saying, I'm not going to get pulled in all these different directions. I'm going to stop and realize love and relationships is more important than other stuff. Sometimes you do that because you go on a vacation and you reflect on your life and you say, man, how I'm living is nuts. Sometimes you do that because you have a big fight with your mate and you realize, why are we living the way we are? Or one of your kids slams the door and says, I hate you and I never see you. Or sometimes God sovereignly brings something into your life that gets your attention and your priorities all of a sudden get crystal clear and your focus, gets riveted. Not quite 2 years ago, God brought an experience into my life where my wife got cancer. God got my focus. I went from a full schedule and travel, and we were doing all kind of things, and the church is growing, and I had to travel, and I was creating videos, and there was all of these things happening. And I remember sitting on the couch with my wife about 3 o'clock in the afternoon when she got the report from the doctor, and that the biopsy, in fact, was positive, that she did have cancer. We needed to go back. It was all uncertain at that point. About 2 months later, she had major surgery, and we went through a journey together. And as I was praying and thinking about what to share with you, with the privilege of kind of coming into your group, I was reviewing my journals, and I got back to the day when God got my attention and my focus. And this is January 2011. And I jotted, serving Teresa in her pain and discomfort has been a special blessing. It's taken me out of my comfort zone. I've done things that I never do, like help dress her and cook and be a nurse. It's stripped all the superficiality away and allowed the kinship and a love for her that's deeper than I've ever had. She's precious to me, not her body, not what she can do for me, not her role as mother or grandmother or lover, but just her in her weakness and her frailty. And then the next line struck me. I wrote, second, her cancer has provided crystal clear focus and clarity as to what matters and what doesn't. Saying no, you ready for this? Saying no has never been easier. And executing what really matters in the very limited time that I've had has brought momentum and traction to my work. You know, I had, in about a minute and a half, I said no to the next 6 months. I canceled everything. I canceled all appointments. I canceled everything that I was going to do other than my basic teaching at the church, going to work. And somehow I had time every single day to drive with her to Stanford and go through all those things that you go through after the surgery. And I never want to get there again, but I will tell you it was precious. It was sweet. And it was sweet because all the stuff, all the demands, it really didn't matter. I mean, it was my wife. God doesn't want you to have to go through cancer or a car wreck or an addiction with one of your kids or some other tragedy. Get your attention to realize, what really matters. What makes the difference is really loving the people God puts in your life. And so first and foremost, I just want to tell you, get your focus. Have a deep talk. Don't be superficial as you share some things in just a few minutes in your group. Have a deep, honest talk about where's your focus, where's your time, where's your priorities, where does your money go? The second thing I would say is you can only do less when you purpose to love more. And I found myself, as I'm growing and learning like you, was that I wanted to have a heart for the things that were on God's heart. And so it was sort of a graduation that I did, and Teresa and myself as a family. And I realized that I would read through the Bible, and for years and years and years, it would talk about widows and orphans and widows and orphans. And, the Bible's pretty full about helping people that are really needy. But I found myself kind of skipping over those verses, not intentionally. Not intentionally. And then I had a close friend that went to Zimbabwe, and with his own money, he bought a little piece of land. And then after that, he built an orphanage. And then after that, it multiplied to like 20 and 30 of these kind of smaller homes. Like there's 2 ladies, and they take 6 or 8 or 9 girls, and they have a home for them, and they cook for them, and they teach them the Bible. And God has just multiplied it like crazy. And I remember Teresa and I thinking, I'd like my heart to be more connected to what's on God's heart with orphans. And so we started supplying some money, monthly. And then we supplied a little bit more monthly. And then I did something that I'd never done before. I'd been to Africa before, but I scheduled time to go to South Africa and to Zimbabwe. And I visited those orphanages. And I got to tell you, I got to stand up to show you this, is we went into the one little home, and you know, these kids, they were 4 and 5, they were taken off the streets. The great majority of them have been abused. They've been through horrendous stuff. And this little girl that I learned later was really, really shy. Her name was Blessing. And we got out of the car, and it was a little fenced-in community and just a tiny little home type thing. And they all lived in there together in little cute bunk beds and did a little bit of schooling. And this little girl walks up to me like this, and she lifts her hands. And I don't know, so I just lifted her up and I put her on my hip. Well, I walked around and did the tour, and in the back they had chickens and they were growing some things. For a half hour, this little girl's on my hip with these big brown eyes just looking at me. And then in front of her was a little 13-year-old girl who'd been taken off the streets 5 years ago. And she began to describe to me what a difference Jesus has made in her life. And I was holding this little girl here, and I thought of the money that goes out the door. And all of a sudden, I got to tell you, I purposed, I planned, I got to taste what really matters. And I thought to myself, you know what, we all have money, we all have time, but it gets pushed and it gets compressed, and we just do stuff and we're driven, and our lives are complex instead of simple. And I'm telling you, when you get focused, when you begin to plan in some things that cause your heart to move where God's heart is, something happens inside. See, the bigger yes. I missed 2 weeks by being in Africa. But you know something? The work went on. Everyone did fine. We're not so indispensable. And God did a miracle in my heart. And I realize I have to plan those times in. Final thing I want you to notice is this, is that you have to begin to redefine success. I mean, if you're tracking with me, at this point you're saying, well, number one, I don't want my wife or husband to get cancer. Number two, I don't know that I can really get away to get to Africa. So what do I do? How do I take some specific steps? I mean, how do I begin to simplify my life? In that passage in 1 Corinthians, there was an issue of performance, an issue of possessing, and an issue of providing. And there's unconscious questions that you and I have been taught that are so ingrained in your mind and head that you ask and answer them all the time with your behavior. Questions like, how did I do? Performance. Questions like, what do I have? Possessions. And questions like, how much do I give? And you'll notice in your notes, I'm going to ask you to write on a 3x5 card 3 new questions. And instead of, how did I do? Start asking, who am I becoming? Instead of performance, it's about character. Instead of asking, what do I have? Start asking, how am I using it? It's from what do I possess and what do people think to stewardship. How am I using it? And then finally, from how much do I give? Because, you know, we all kind of go into, well, I do this, and I give my time, and I give my money. Instead of asking that, ask, why do I give it? Motives. Those 3 questions will take you down a path that God will renew your mind and great things will start to happen in you. Look, this is not about a quick fix, a little, you know, kind of Bible study or Sunday school class where we get our arms around one new concept. You need to renew your mind. So I'm going to ask you, write those questions, put them on a 3x5 card, and then just read it over in the morning, read it at night, put it in your car. For some of you, maybe put it on the mirror in the bathroom, and just ask those new questions and see if God doesn't do something deep and powerful in your heart. So as we start our study, here's what I want you to ask and answer. In what ways have you tried to simplify your life? I mean, what specific steps have you done in the past to simplify your life? And then what were the results? And those of you that are facilitating, why don't you start and kind of lead out, and then the rest of you, let's just take, give us 2 or 3 sentences about kind of what you've done and how that's gone.